History recorded what Saladin did. Almost no one recorded who he was when the battle was over and the tent was empty.
His name, as we have explored on this channel, was Saladin Yusuf ibn Ayyub, the Sultan, the liberator of Jerusalem, the warrior who sent his own physicians to a dying enemy king. If you have watched the Saladin video on this channel, you know the code he operated by in public, the 7 rules of honor that made him the most respected figure of his era, among his allies and his enemies alike. But there is another Saladin, the one that his personal biographer, a scholar named Al-Adil ibn Shaddad, recorded not in the official chronicles, but in the quiet moments, the private conversations, the unguarded hours after battle, the letters written at night when the campaign was uncertain and the outcome unknowable. Ibn Shaddad traveled with Saladin for years. He watched him in private, and what he recorded reveals something that the official histories almost always smooth away: the full humanity of an extraordinary person. This is not the legend. This is the man.
Ibn Shaddad recorded that Saladin rarely slept through the night during campaigns, not from strategy, from the weight of being responsible for the lives of every person under his command. He wrote of Saladin spending hours after midnight in prayer and private reflection, not performing piety for an audience. The tent was empty, the guards outside, genuinely alone with the scale of what he was responsible for. In a letter to his brother, Al-Adil, recorded in the historical sources, Saladin wrote words to this effect: "I am tired in body, but I cannot permit the spirit to rest while there are those who depend on my wakefulness." A man who had just won a significant military engagement, writing to his brother not about the victory, but about the people whose lives the victory would determine. This is the first private truth about Saladin. The extraordinary public strength was built on an equally extraordinary private burden. He felt the weight. He did not pretend otherwise, at least not in the tent when the lamp was low. There is something in this for every person who leads anything. The weight is real. Pretending it is not there does not make you stronger. Saladin's honesty about the burden, at least in private, at least with his own heart, is part of what made him capable of carrying it. The correspondence between Saladin and his brother Al-Adil is one of the most touching records in Arab medieval history. Al-Adil was also a military commander, capable, trusted, Saladin's right hand in many campaigns. But in the letters, he is also simply a brother. Saladin wrote to him about exhaustion, about doubt, about the campaigns that were not going well. He asked for counsel not as a sultan to a general, but as an older brother to the person who knew him before the titles. There is a recorded exchange, not fabricated, drawn from the historical record, where Saladin, after a period of illness during a campaign, wrote to Al-Adil expressing what can only be described as homesickness, not for a place, for the ease of being known, of being with someone who did not need him to perform anything. Ibn Shaddad noted that Saladin's relationship with his brother was the most reliable source of his emotional equilibrium during the campaigns, not his military victories, not the loyalty of his generals, the knowledge that one person knew him completely and chose to stay. This is Wafa in practice. The loyalty between these two men, across decades and campaigns and the weight of empire, was the private foundation of the public record. Before the campaign to recapture Jerusalem, the moment that history records as his greatest achievement, Saladin experienced what Ibn Shaddad recorded as a period of profound private doubt, not about military strategy, about worthiness. He reportedly spent extended periods in private prayer and fasting before the final campaign. Ibn Shaddad, who was present, recorded that Saladin said something to the effect of, "I am afraid not of the battle, but of what comes after it. Power reveals what preparation hides." He had spent 2 decades preparing for this moment, and on the threshold of it, he was most concerned not with whether he could win, but with whether, having won, he would be the person the victory required him to be. This is the anxiety not of a weak man, but of a serious one. The person who is not serious about the responsibility does not worry about whether they are equal to it. Saladin's doubt before Jerusalem was evidence of exactly the quality that made him extraordinary after it. When Jerusalem fell to Saladin's forces in 1187, the Crusader population expected massacre. The city had been taken by the First Crusade in 1099 with extraordinary violence. Historical accounts record that the streets ran with blood. This was the established pattern of conquest in that era. Saladin ordered mercy. Not as a calculated political gesture, though it was also that, but Ibn Shaddad recorded that Saladin wept after the recapture, not from triumph, from the weight of what had finally been resolved, and from relief that it had been resolved without the violence that had stained the city's history. He personally intervened in multiple cases to prevent his own soldiers from acts of revenge. He arranged for the poor among the Christian population who could not pay their own ransom to be released without payment. He allowed Christian pilgrims continued access to their holy sites. The Byzantine envoy who had wept upon finding the Caliph asleep under a tree, that same quality of character was present in Jerusalem. The victory did not change him, because the character was not built on the winning. Saladin died in Damascus in March 1193. He was approximately 55 years old, not old by any measure. Ibn Shaddad was with him. When Saladin died, the treasury was almost empty. He had given almost everything away. Not from mismanagement, from deliberate choice. The wealth that passed through his hands during decades of campaigns and governance had been redistributed to those who needed it. Ibn Shaddad recorded that the funeral shroud had to be provided by others. The Sultan of an empire, the liberator of Jerusalem, the man Richard of England had called his greatest adversary, buried with almost nothing of material value to his name. And yet every account of his final days describes a man who was, the Arabic word is sakin, at rest. Not at peace because everything had worked out, at rest because he had been, as fully as a human being can be, who he intended to be. History recorded what Saladin did: the battles, the campaigns, the diplomacy, the mercy at Jerusalem. Ibn Shaddad recorded who he was when the battle was over and the tent was empty. A man who could not sleep because of the weight of others depending on him. A brother who needed one person to know him completely. A leader who doubted his worthiness before his greatest moment. A conqueror who wept when the conquest was complete. And a man who died with almost nothing because he had spent his life giving away everything except what could not be taken: his word, his character, his wafa. That is who Saladin was in private. That is the person the history books compress into a sentence.